Hey everyone, and welcome back to Miles on the Grid. This is episode 4 of season 3. In today's episode, we're joined by two amazing guests from Racing Incident, Ellen and Anna, and we'll be discussing all things Imola, looking back at some of the, dare I say, the narrative that was spoken about, looking at the decisions that are taken for the sake of a championship and for the good of the sport, to quote a Mr. Well, I won't say his name because I don't want to get sued. And also looking at who could potentially be our surprise winner from not only next week in the Miami Grand Prix, but also looking at the connotations for the Miami Grand Prix itself and why the event was decided to be hosted there, which I think there's a bit of an interesting backstory, which hasn't necessarily been covered as much. But let's get straight into it. Welcome, Anna and Alan. How are you both?
Hi.
Hi, I'm doing really good. How are you, Miles?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I am. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm buzzing. Very eager to have you both on the show to get your thoughts because I know just for a bit of context, anyone who's listening, hopefully you are. Um, Anna and Ellen have started a podcast called Racing Incident. I've been listening to the first 3 episodes. It's epic. This isn't trying to blow smoke up anyone. But it's just to provide a bit of context. They're doing amazing stuff. So please do go and follow them over at Racing Incident on Twitter.
Aw, thank you.
Thanks,
I'm
Miles.
also I'm also doing okay, although I was actually a little bit bummed this morning about the Miami situation, which we'll talk about, but I feel better now that we're talking to you.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. You're way too kind. So I mean, I think first things first. We had Imola last week. It was wet, it was
We
cold.
had an Imola.
Yeah, it looked like it was not going to be a fantastic event, given the fact that it was also the first sprint weekend as well. And I have a different view on sprints. I'm not going to get into them. We don't have this.
No,
But
what's your view? I have to know. I have to know.
you know what's crazy? I'm not a fan of the concept, but I still tune in.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Well,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, I think everyone does, whether they love it or hate it or don't care one way or the other. Like that's, they're so the job is done. I feel like the people who don't like it
yeah.
are more, well, what are your reasons? What are your reasons you're not crazy about it?
I think initially last year it took away from the purity of the sport. So we didn't actually know who was on pole. I liked the idea that they brought back the reefs and gave the drivers a sort of medal. But it was a bit of a shame to see someone like Lewis, for example, and I'm not going to be a bandwagon fan. I'm just putting that out there. I've heard that before. But Lewis drove a blistering lap at Silverstone last year. Almost lost the rear end of his car, still collected it and managed to put it on hold by I think it was about maybe like 2 or 3 tenths. And he got a reef. No record, nothing that's in the record books.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Yeah.
spoken about enough. There's
But
the same
do you feel at all better with that they've made that change, that the qualifying is still, that last year they were doing it where, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Does
right.
that doesn't make you feel any better?
No, it doesn't. I'll be honest. I was about to try and come up with yeah, it doesn't. And I'll say why, because I think we're trying to add so many different ways for people to get into the sport, which is great. Don't get me wrong, I think it's fantastic. But a Grand Prix is a Grand Prix. If we're going to do
Yep.
sprint races, make it like F2, reverse grids. Let's see who can
Yeah.
climb away from the back. Let's see who actually becomes a real
Mhm.
champ, as
Yeah.
opposed to this, where you might get a point if you're in the top 8, or if you're on the cusp of
hmm
getting pole position, you're actually going to start second on the grid on the Saturday
Mhm.
or whatever. What's your thoughts? I can see you're about to say something, Anna.
Oh, I just was gonna say I don't like that whoever wins the sprint race
Yeah,
becomes pole for the Grand Prix. I think that, like you said, it kind of messes with the purity of the sport.
yeah,
Mhm.
Um, because then it's not consistent through across all the races throughout all the years.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I have like mixed feelings. I don't know, I guess, which is rare for me to say, that I don't have a firm opinion on something. Very unusual for me, but in this case I kind of, yeah, I can see both sides.
mm,
I can see, I listen to what you guys are saying and I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. I think that that's right, that makes sense to me. And then I think about, situations like last season at Monza, that McLaren like 1-2 wouldn't have happened probably if not for the sprint. So it can produce these interesting, unusual, different results, which are not completely unearned or anything, but it was because of the sprint that that you can have somebody who moves up a position or several or whatever, and then suddenly now they're in contention for a win or a podium that they weren't before. So I think, I guess it depends. It depends from sprint to sprint, I guess, whether it's a good sprint or not, and whether it was worthwhile or not. So I hope they pick the right. Well, sometimes it's a bit up to chance, I guess, but next year it's going to be 6 sprints.
Yes. Yeah.
So I hope, which we'll probably be talking about next time we do our show. But it's just a matter of, I hope they pick the right races, the right tracks, and not just, to who's ever going to give them the most money, which is probably where.
Well, I thought Silverstone was great. Like, I loved the sprint there. I was like, oh, this was awesome. And then I watched it at Monza and I was like, no. I'm good. I've seen enough.
Some people had, as I recall in Monza, some people had for McLaren it was good, and then some people had bad things happen there, I think, where I was like, ooh, this is what that's gotta really hurt. Like, you're like, oh, I'd qualified okay, and then in the sprint I had this thing happen, and now I'm way down the order. So, but that's supposed to be the point, I guess, right, to try to make things more interesting or exciting or whatever. Miles, if they did a reverse grid for it, would you have that not count for anything then, or would it still be? It would be points, but it wouldn't set the grid for the race. Is that?
Yes.
Is that how you would? Okay.
Or
I kind of like that.
Yeah. Or maybe have like a mini championship or something similar to.
I
don't know, like
that's a good
cool.
idea. I like that.
20 laps or something. Just not the Grand Prix championship, because
I actually love that. I actually love the idea of a mini championship, like the way that they tell you, like, who's done the most overtakes in a season, who's done, all that sort of. That's a great idea. They could give some kind of sprint champion award for it, and
Well, also that would be great for kind of these like younger up and coming drivers who aren't really necessarily getting. It's not that they're not getting attention, but obviously the team is going to put a lot of focus into the number one driver. So something like this might be helpful for the development of these younger drivers or number 2 drivers to kind of get them some confidence. And some wins.
Or for teams that are like really good in the first stint and then not so much after that, because that's what it is the first stint. So, you could, the idea, I feel like the idea is not a bad idea. It's just maybe the way it's implemented needs a little work or something, but
I think
we should put you in charge, Miles.
No, not at all. I think there's definitely room for what both of you have said individually, in the sense of, Ellen, you saying that maybe we could have like development drivers, or maybe younger drivers, people like, I don't want to say Piastri because I think he's too good for anything apart from F1, but people like Charles last year, or I don't want to say Nick de Vries. I like Nick de Vries, but
he should be an F1.
He should be an F1. This is the thing, like, who? Maybe Terry Pocher,
Liam
Lawson.
Yeah.
Those guys. Absolutely.
Bring them in for a weekend. Let them test out.
Jamie Chadwick.
That would be a great support series event.
Yeah,
that would be incredible.
Okay, we got to put you in charge, Miles. I know you said you don't want it, but
I
sometimes greatness comes all at once, and you have to accept it.
Yeah, no, I don't know if Ross Brawn would ever take my.
Probably not. Okay, we're all in the same. We're all in the same boat there. It's no one's taking our advice on anything either. So.
Well, this is the thing. If he's not taking George's advice, he definitely won't take mine.
I know. Can you believe that? Are we allowed to curse or no?
No, we're PG. Unfortunately.
Okay, all right, no cursing. That's fine. Totally good. Yeah,
family friendly podcast.
Yeah. I like it.
My mother listens to this, so I keep
it. So sweet.
Keep it zipped up for me.
My parents don't listen to mine. You're good job for your mom.
See,
Uh,
it's probably out of courtesy rather than an actual love.
Nevertheless,
But I'm just thinking, over the next few minutes, Miami is coming up. And I think it was yourselves that had actually highlighted this to myself. For those of you that are listening or will listen to this show, the Miami Grand Prix is the first one to be held in Miami for F1 ever. Fantastic. Amazing. Well, I don't say an amazing track. It looks quite fast. It looks like there's going to be some really interesting hairpins. There's a bit of an issue as to how about this Miami Grand Prix came about. And there's a bit of an understory. It was set to be, yes, I know, we're almost there, but it was set to be developed in one of the in the regional districts, which is mainly hosted by the Black American community in Miami. Now, this had pushed a particular narrative that they were happy to have this event, and that the local I'm not from America, but the local population were happy to have this event in their backyard. And they had put up like a court case, and they put up like a legal challenge, I believe, in the justice system. And it was quashed, unfortunately. But I know you both have actually spoken about this in a bit more depth, and I think you'd highlighted a thread. Do you just want to quickly run through some of the key, not key issues as to why Miami shouldn't take place, but some of the particular nuances as to why it might not be the right time for the Miami Grand to be taking place and in the right area?
Yeah, basically, I'll talk about some of it, and then you chime in with anything I may have forgotten, which I often do. But basically, the situation is that the race originally, when F1 wanted to come to Miami, well, I guess I should go further back. Like, it's important to note, and there was a great article in Jalopnik that Elizabeth Blackstock wrote on this issue that I recommend people to check out. And you can listen to also our recent episode where we talked about it, and you can look in like our show notes. We have all the links. But in any event, this is really 40 years ago when the stadium was first built. The community didn't want the stadium there either, which happens very often in the US with any kind of, we have terrible housing segregation in the US. Basically, what I mean by that is that, communities of color and white communities are often very segregated as to where they live. The white residents live over here and people of color live over there. And there are communities that are more diverse and such, but overall it's really, really bad. That's due to some historical factors, due to the fact that it actually used to be legal to do this, to, not to allow people of color to live in a certain area. And of course, informally, that can still go on in terms of when, if you've come to the Miami area, let's say, and you're looking to buy a home, when you go see a real estate agent, they might right away take you to Miami Gardens, let's say, which is a majority Black area, when, maybe you could buy a house wherever you want, but they would just assume that maybe you'd like to live in the area where a lot of other Black people live. So, so because of the segregation, communities don't have equal access to, resources, to funding, to investment. There's often in communities that are more, that are majority Black or other people of color, Latinx people, etc. Often those communities don't have, they may have poorer transportation. They may have, they may not as much retail, not as many businesses, because, a business calculates that maybe if they open a business in that area that they won't make as much money as if they open a business in a more affluent area, etc. And it's all these kinds of things compounding. And then, when it's time for a city to build a stadium or a, petrochemical plant or any kind of anything that's, not desirable, that lots of people wouldn't want in their community because it would lower their property values, etc. Those types of things get put in communities of color because those communities have less political capital, less, influence, less, they're not donating as much to people's campaigns who are running for office, etc. And so it just, things get plunked there. And that's what happened with the stadium. It's what happens all over the US very, very often with all kinds of things. And so this was many, many years ago that the stadium was built. But I think it's important to have that background, to know that this is not like some new, people didn't just wake up yesterday and decide that they don't want this race. This is an ongoing thing for people who've been living in this community, that we didn't even want the stadium. Okay, now it's here. We don't have a choice in the matter. But now there's this race coming, which is going to be extremely loud and disruptive, and it's not just a one-day event. It's important to remember that aspect too, which I feel like, frankly, a lot of the discussion around this is really disgusting in its dismissiveness of people's concerns. Just because you want to enjoy watching this race or attending this race, whatever the case may be, you're willing to just crap on these people and say that their concerns don't matter, they're not valid. Oh, just put in earplugs or go. I had somebody recently tell me something like, oh, if they were smart, they would like leave town and rent their house out as an Airbnb. I was like, okay, so not everyone can afford to just go on an impromptu vacation, number one.
Doesn't require planning.
And doesn't,
and money.
And just decide to, there's a lot of, we know that F1 is run on money, lots of money. But unfortunately, what ends up happening, I think, is whether because of the fact that it's like that, or whether because people who are fans come to relate more to the people who are involved in the sport, the drivers, the bosses, the whoever, and so you have an audience that is also on the higher end of the income spectrum and is more white, at least in some places, obviously not everywhere, but because there's huge communities of fans in Africa and other places who aren't white, but people who have more means, more financial means, I would say. And so there's just a lot of blindness that comes with that privilege, where you can, where I'm seeing a lot of that, where both Elle and I have been seeing a lot of that. And we've been talking, that's why I was bummed this morning, like I mentioned earlier, because I was just, it's just so disappointing when you talk to people sometimes about these things, that they just brush it off. They say, oh, this is like, or people relate, or they'll relate it to an experience. Like I've had people say, for example, here in Chicago, near where we live, there are stadiums in Chicago, of course, where our baseball teams play.
Yes.
And one of them is in like a neighborhood, like it's really
in the middle of them are.
Well, that's true. But it's one of them's in a very affluent neighborhood, and predominantly white neighborhood. And there were people who live in that area who were telling me like, oh, what's the big deal? I have to deal with this too. Like when there's a baseball game, and there are drunk people walking down my street or peeing on my lawn. I'm like,
but you don't have to.
Yeah, it's not the same.
You don't have to. You don't have to deal with that.
It's not the same. First of all, it is a bit annoying, but when you're someone who has chosen to live in that area, like you probably have, you are somebody with means to live in that area, so who you can afford rent in that area or to buy a home in that area. You are making that choice knowing that this is something that's going to be a part of your life baseball season is very long, in fact, so there are a lot of games. But again, the game is a one-day thing too, so you have there's games like they do come very often, but it's it's just this just dismissiveness, this attitude of like, oh, it's not a big deal, what are they complaining about? It's just so disheartening. To finish the point about what's going on. So initially, these residents in Miami Gardens, which is not Miami Gardens is a different city to Miami.
Okay.
It's like it's like what I'm trying to think of, like an example of in the UK where this would, like, there's London, right? But then there's like what Sheffield, Kent, things, right? It's it's like that.
It's not as simple as that though, because Miami itself is really small. London is massive.
True.
And so
it's not the same.
But a better example would be like, so you have London, right? But Camden is like a borough within London. I think that's a better example.
That is that's true. That is better.
You know,
it's a little bit, it's complicated.
Are you from Camden?
No, I used to work in Camden. Shout out to
Camden.
It's
complicated.
Market. It's very cool. I've only been to London once, but
I haven't been yet. I'm mad. Okay. Someday.
It's a great town. But yeah, I think that's a better example of how that is. Miami, and this is true of most US cities. The actual city itself is very small. It's
some
the
are
surrounding
bigger,
areas.
Like
LA, for example. LA itself, very small, like the actual city of LA, but Glendale is something people would consider LA, but it's a separate
and
city.
people will, it's so complicated and weird. But what's important to understand is that, again, this is a discrete community that is not, this is not what people, when you see the marketing for this race and all the stuff and all the whatever, you're thinking South Beach, right? You're thinking, I'm at the club. You're thinking, Will Smith, Welcome to Miami. You're thinking Pitbull. You're thinking, right? That's not where the race is.
No.
All the people who are going to be going to the race, whether as spectators or all the people who are the teams and everyone else, who they'll be staying somewhere 20 miles, however, maybe it's not that much, but they'll be staying somewhere else. They are not staying in this community. This community is not going to be benefiting financially from this race. So it's important for people to realize that there was a court case that was filed before the one that's getting the more attention currently, and that was a court case that was filed in federal court to say that that was on the grounds of that people in this community were saying that their civil rights were being violated, meaning because this is a majority Black community and, you've not gotten any buy-in from us on this. We don't want this event here, et cetera. And they lost that case. So now they're having to go, now they're trying at the state level to try to make this case that this, the noise, or, because there are like laws about noise, and like how loud you can have things, how like you can somebody could call the police if you're having a party that's too loud or something like that, that sort of thing. There are laws about those things. So, and there's laws about events that are loud. And so, but people don't understand, what people don't understand is that it's not about the noise. Like, this is just what they're having to do. This is their only recourse now for trying to prevent this, because even though this race will go forward, and even though they sort of in a way lost their last court battle, but it isn't actually over. There could still be further action on this, because the judge did say that, well, we could, if you still, like, the judge ruled that in this, like, for this particular moment, it's over, but they have a 10-year contract for this race. So if they decide to press forward and to try to continue to try to have the event not be going on there's a chance that could still work out. And then, and then if there was a legal decision, then it would be like, sorry about your contract, but there's a chance. I mean, it's probably not a good chance based on just knowing the way the U.S. Law works, and usually it's especially in these types of matters, but there's still technically a chance.
Okay, well, I think it's I don't want to offer comment on a US specific issue, because I'm not there, but what I would say is that it's very disheartening to see certain sections of the F1 community, particularly on Twitter, because I don't really do Instagram with F1 that much, but to see certain
that won't
voices.
Be any better, I can tell you.
Oh, gosh, I'm staying away then. I might run away to TikTok, but it's probably even worse than that. So it's a bit scary to see the lack of accountability, and I don't know if you were about to touch on that, because you look like you're about to jump in on that.
No, I'm just agreeing with you, because it is really disheartening. And I was trying to find, some information about the federal lawsuit, because I do think that lawsuit is interesting. But I can't seem to find any like free information about it. It's all behind paywall, which is very annoying.
Yeah.
But also too, it's just really disheartening. And also too, it's not lost on me, I just thought of this, that they're basically recreating like the South Beach Harbor Marina area, like in a parking lot. So then like all of these rich people can like go to this fake marina and like sit on their fake boats and their fake lake, instead of just like dealing with the inconvenience of putting it in actual South Beach.
Yeah, and that's the thing too that I didn't even know before we got into this and started learning more about what happened. And when we talked to Elizabeth Blacksocket-Jalopnik, initially, because what initially had happened is she wrote like this brief item about it, and also had that same tone of like, what are these people complaining about, sort of like it's not that bad. And I messaged her and I was like, listen, there's a lot more going on here than you may realize, and here's some information, etc. And so she wrote this whole long piece actually then explaining that and saying that she made a mistake, that her initial kind of take was not informed and she was lacking a lot of context for it, which is what I see a lot of when people comment on the situation, being just like, what's the big deal? Well, you don't actually know what's going on. You don't actually know all the details. You don't know all the context. Many of the people commenting are not Americans, so they don't know about the racial politics in the US and things like that. Of course, these issues exist everywhere else too, but the US is a bit unique in some ways there. And so it's just very, there's total lack of accountability or anything of that nature. And what it's interesting you mentioned the fake marina, Elle, because I was just thinking that, yeah, you could have had, because what initially they wanted to do, they did want it to be a real street race, not in a parking lot. They wanted it to be a real street race in Miami, like Fast and the Furious, right? That would have been awesome.
Which I kind of would, I'm not gonna lie, I would have been into that.
Yeah, that would have, well, that
would have been very interesting.
That would have been better, I think. And that is what they wanted to do. But of course, what happened is that where they wanted to do that was in actual Miami, where there are businesses and mainly white people or people with greater financial means. And those people were like, nah, no thanks. Because, of course, it would mean there'd be construction of barriers and this and that and traffic disruption and all these things. Those people said, no, thanks. So we'll just foist it on these Black people instead. Because it's, there's a stadium there anyway. They have games and concerts there anyway. What are you complaining about? What do you, it's a terrible attitude.
Something else that I think is, and I had just honestly totally forgot about this until right now, that I feel like hasn't been brought up, is that Stephen Ross, who is the owner of the Miami Dolphins, which is where they play at Hard Rock Stadium, which is where the F1 race is going to happen. He was bidding to buy F1 when it was up for sale from Bernie Ecclestone.
Yep.
I forgot about the,
call me disillusioned, but I'm sure there's some weird corrupt deal thing happening there with Liberty Media.
Corrupt F1? Surely you jest.
Oh, never heard of it.
Careful now, you don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
It beggars belief sometimes when I see some of the places that that F1 goes to race at. One, because of issues on rights, as well as it's. Okay, I'll touch on the Saudi track very quickly.
Yeah.
But guessing this year and the fact that there was like a whole scare with missiles and whatnot up to about maybe a day before. The track wasn't ready up until about maybe a week before, but it's been issued like a grade A license. But then you've got tracks like Kalami, you've got tracks like the Nürburgring, like Hockenheim, which can't get to be on the calendar just due to a lack of funding or a perceived lack of interest. Now, this leads me to a bigger question, and one which we'll have to sort of be quick on just because of time. But with some of the tracks coming up that aren't necessarily, let's say, the most natural, so Miami, we've got potentially another race coming up to replace the lost Russian Grand Prix. Do we think that these tracks will have an impact upon the championship itself? Whether that be Charles, Max, George, Lando, whoever, Perez, Carlos. Do we think that these tracks will play such a big factor, or do we think that it's more done from an entertainment perspective? The reason I ask.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
What were you gonna say?
What were you going to say, Miles?
No, I was going to say the reason I ask is because for me, racing should be about racing. Whether you're going to Silverstone or whether you're going to Kota or whether you're going to Spa, these are tracks which demand the most for the drivers, demand the most of the mechanics, the engineers, the pit wall crew, and everyone back at the relative factories to get the best out of their team on that given day, or that given race weekend, or that given testing period. I'm not a fan of going to tracks for the sake of an entertainment value because, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, and I might get flamed later when this comes out. It can devalue a championship. It can take away from the perspective of it.
I agree. It's a very fine line between performance and competition.
Yes.
And I mean performance, I mean like something like WWE, like wrestling, something like that.
Yeah.
That's a spectacle, it's a performance. It's not really a sport. And that's okay as long as you're aware of that. I would prefer F1 to stay a sport, a competition, not a performance, a spectacle.
Yeah.
But it's a fine line, right? And so,
yeah,
I hope
it's a
that it
tough
stays for quality of racing, which is why I would be really sad if Monaco left the calendar. I know people don't like it because it doesn't produce the best racing per se, but I think that it is a test of a driver's skill and agility and how well they're able to handle the car down the tight corners of, some very scary turns.
Yeah, Mazepin couldn't even talk to his engineer when he's driving in Monaco.
Yeah. And if you
like,
can
not now.
Yeah, if you can do that, like you're a driver.
I don't think Mazepin's engineer wants to talk to him.
No, that's true. He didn't, but he was trying to like tell him to do something.
Yeah, I know.
At like some set or whatever. Do you remember that? And he was like, "I'm in Monaco. Are you kidding?"
Like, interesting though.
He knows where you are, but anyway. But
no.
what my response to that is it is a really interesting question, and you've really made me think here. I think that I guess where I come down on it is that would be my preference too. It would be my preference if it could remain about racing, and that it's but it's like this is like the central dilemma of Formula One, isn't it? Whether it's a show or whether it's a sport, whether it's a business or whether it's a sport, can you really ever separate the two? Can you really ever, because you kind of can't, right? Because these teams cost so much money to run and to do that, you cannot unfortunately separate. It's like, I wish you could. I really wish you could. I wish we could just have these guys, go out there and give their all, and it didn't matter whether, but you can't, in order for it to be the pinnacle of motorsport, quote unquote, that it takes so much money and so many resources to do it, that and also we have to, like, thinking about just the history of Formula One, which isn't a long history really when you look at, it's not that long a history as compared to many other sports, right? That it's, has it ever been 100% about the racing? Probably not. And I think that there's a lot of, among fans like us, I think all of us here now, and many other people I know who are fans who, it's a bit of like wishful thinking sometimes. Unfortunately, it's like you have to be honest with yourself and say that, do you want to go see pure racing? I mean, you can go down to your local go-kart track and see pure racing. That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you're spending your time watching these cars and these drivers and these teams doing this, you have to on some level, get okay with the fact that this is not going to be 100% pure racing. This is not going to be, it's not going to be totally WWE, but it's not going to be totally, totally only about the sport and about the racing. But having said that, I think that we do need to, as fans or as people commentating on it or whatever else, I think that the pressure does need to always stay for it to remain as much about the racing and as much about the sport as possible. Given the fact that we know it can never 100% be that, we still have to, I feel like we still have to put pressure on it being as much that as we can, because otherwise it starts to veer, too much into, many people felt that last season of being an example, maybe where it went too far in that direction. And I definitely, that describes how I feel. So I think that we just have to like kind of keep that balance as best we can.
No, I agree. I think the balance between business and And racing's always going to be there. Like even at grassroots,
Mhm.
I was at British Superbikes 2 weeks ago, and the average cost of running a superbike team, well, about maybe a couple of years ago, was around 250 grand to 300 grand,
Wow. Yeah.
and that's
That's
just for bikes that aren't you're not getting
mhm.
paid for it. You know,
Right.
that's
Insane.
purely from like an
Right.
investment uh, aspect. So I know on F1's level, it's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
millions to even get a
Well,
look
and
at
it's
it.
just getting worse and worse. It seems like, from what I understand, like, I mean, Lewis has talked a bunch of times about how he's talked about that, like how when he was karting, like that, what they had to go through and to try to keep him in that was that he said, like, if it was today, like that he wouldn't even be able to do it.
Yeah,
He wouldn't, with the same level of resources and with the same whatever, that he wouldn't even be able to afford it. He has said. So it's a real problem, actually. So that's a whole other topic, but yeah, it's a real problem.
on the topic of cost, and I'm aware we have about 5 minutes. Um, with many teams bringing supposed upgrades to start of Miami, so I know Mercedes and Ferrari have spoken about it. Red Bull will always try and outdevelop their competitors. So I hold no um, I hold no wishful thinking. I know that they'll bring some upgrades, but do we think that? Actually, no. I'll rephrase the question. Who do we believe, given the fact that the teams are now in an all-out development war, will capture the World Drivers' Championship in F1?
I think well,
I
I'll go first.
I want to make a bold prediction.
Ooh.
This
Okay, sure.
is because why not? I I proclaim this to be the year of the second driver. Um,
Okay.
I think that Leclerc and Verstappen could take each other out.
Mm, yeah.
I don't think it'll get as nasty as Lewis and him last year,
Mm.
which we all know that Lewis is the rightful winner last year, but whatever. Um, so
Sorry,
I
Max
think
fans.
that what?
I said sorry, Max fans.
Sorry,
Yeah, no, I'm not sorry.
no. Um, yeah, so I feel like it's going to be the year of the second driver. I mean, like Perez, Russell, Sainz, like they're all doing really well. I mean, Sainz has had some bad luck, so
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
we'll see. But
A lot.
Perez is right there, and so is Russell. So I think that those could be the surprises of the year. As for constructors, I think Ferrari,
You think Ferrari? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
but it could be Red Bull too. I mean, if they figure out their reliability issue, it could be them.
Ooh, okay. I,
I I'm gonna go ahead and say it is not the year of the second driver. I don't think so. I mean, just I don't think that. I mean, with Carlos, technically the jury's still out because he's had a lot of bad luck. A lot of things have not gone his way, so we don't actually know. I mean, when we've had a pretty close head-to-head comparison when nothing's gone wrong in qualifying or etc., he's been still a bit off Charles or Charles. I did try to commit to pronouncing it correctly. Charles Leclerc, not Charles Leclerc, but he does respond to either one, so it's fine. But yeah, Carlos, he's still a little bit off Charles, but we also know that Carlos is an extremely hard worker and an extremely fast learner. So over the course of the season, it's entirely possible that he could get on that level, and maybe
yeah.
he would have already been over the last couple races if things had not gone very, very badly for him that were out of his control in some cases. Some weren't, but some were. So I think he's the one I would say that if you're gonna make the bold prediction that it's the year of the second driver, I would put my money on him
Okay.
above anyone else, because I feel like the other, I mean, George, we don't know. Actually, that's another one that's an open question, isn't it? We don't actually know what's going on in that Mercedes team, to be quite honest. Like, there's a lot of information we don't have, and people are just making all sorts of assumptions
Yeah.
that,
True.
which is what people do.
Yeah.
But I get really irritated by that sometimes, because I'm like, you don't actually know what you're talking about. You're just, have you talked to the people at the factory? Have you talked to Lewis? Have you talked to George? Have you talked to Toto? No, I don't want to hear what you have to say then.
Mm.
But so that's another one where I don't know. But I think Checo is as good as I think Checo is, and this car suits him so much better this year than last year's car, seemingly. I think that he's probably still not on Max's level overall. So I don't think that. So I
Checo is only 5 points behind him right now.
I know, but that was because he had one less DNF, and he.
That's what I mean. I think if Leclerc and Verstappen take each other out, like.
True.
So,
yeah. I don't know. I don't think that that's going to happen. Even if it happens like once or twice, like I feel like that's not going to happen. I mean, even last season with it being those cars being so much, there's so much talk about that. Like, why is this season so much more polite? Right? Is like these cars you're going to get another chance to possibly make a move. You're going to get, that last season that it was like, oh, I have to. This is my one shot.
Yeah, it was do or die.
I have to go with do or die. Which I don't know how I feel about that because. It's like I feel like it's like letting Max off the hook, I guess, sort of. But it is, yeah.
So quick take. Who would you both have for the drivers?
Oh, how do you mean? Like if we're running a Formula One team, who would be our drivers?
No, if you had 20 seconds to decide who's winning the championship, who do you have?
Oh my god!
Off the top of my head, Leclerc.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say the same, and it's partially
with the info I have right now, Leclerc.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the same, just because although to be 100% honest, I mean, it's very hard for me to give an answer just based on like logic, and do you know what I mean? Like feelings get in the way, right? And I have many negative feelings towards Max, so it's very hard for me to say that maybe it could be Max. But it could be Max, right? Like we have to be honest.
I'm going to shock you with mine. I'm a Ferrari fan from birth.
Oh, Ferrari.
Ferrari. Lewis is my favorite driver. But as he's not in the title fight right now, I do think it falls de facto to Max. And I'll tell you in 20 seconds why. Max last year came so close to having one of the most dominant early starts to the season I think I've seen. That Austria back-to-back.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely ridiculous. I don't, upgrades or not, that was on a different level. Charles, as much as I love him, and I think he should win this season due to one, Ferrari being Ferrari and the fact that they look so strong, he is prone to errors and making them at decisive times. And as much as I want to put my money, well, proverbial money, if anyone listens to this, especially not my money.
Imaginary money.
Imaginary money. As much as I want to put my Monopoly money on Charles to win and to win convincingly by about maybe 6 to 7 races to go, I just can't see Red Bull being outdeveloped by Ferrari. We saw it in 2018, and for that reason, I not regretfully, but I'll have to say it will be Max.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably true. It'll be his first legitimate championship. Let's clap. No more human error. Whatever. I'm not sorry. I'm sorry, not sorry. But yeah. But I mean, like I said, to be honest, he is really, really good, of course. So, and I do think, and Charles, that's true, that he will just like, like we just saw in Imola, where,
I could see him and Carlos taking points with each other, whereas Perez will have to hold station for the sake of his job.
Yep.
But
with
that in mind, unfortunately we have to run. But it's been an absolute pleasure to meet both of you, because I know that we've spoken on Twitter and we retweet and stuff, which is awesome. But everyone, please do go follow the team at Racing Incident on Twitter, on Instagram as well. I don't know if you're on TikTok as well, or
we're not, no. But you can also go to racingincident.com, which is the easiest place to subscribe to it, because there's a nice button there.
You heard it here first, racingincident.com, and subscribe. But Anna, Elle, thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll talk more in the future.
Thanks, sure
Miles.
We will. We love you, Miles.
Yes, thank you so much. We had a great time.
No, thank you. And everyone, please do check out their podcast as well. If you haven't listened yet, do subscribe. It is epic, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.